Okay. Well, good afternoon again. My name is Valerie Borak, and I'm with Plumline Consulting, and I have Liz Pateo on the line with me, and she is the Director of Sales at FastPath. And today we are going to be talking to you about Assure and Audit Trail powered by FastPath. And here's our pretty pictures if you wanted to know who was talking to you today. I just wanted to say a little bit about what our relationship is with FastPath. So Plumline, all of you know, has been around for years in the SL community, and we're located in Findlay, Ohio. We have over 100 add-on products for Dynamics SL, and we have partnered with FastPath to provide the SL community Assure and Audit Trail, which are two products that FastPath provides for Dynamics SL. FastPath as well has been in the SL community for years, and they have other add-on modules for the dynamic suites. So we are now the provider of the Assure and Audit Trail products that they provide. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Liz, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about Assure and Audit Trail, and then we'll get right into the demo.
Great, thanks, Valerie. And so, first of all, I want to say thank you for putting on this webinar. We're really thankful for the partnership that we have. You guys have been a really strong member of the SL community for many, many years, and we're excited to partner with you guys. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Assure, which is our risk-based security analysis tool, a security access review and segregation of duty analysis tool. Basically, what this tool does is it allows you to take an in-depth look at the security that you've granted to your Dynamics SL tool to your users, and basically tell you where there might be issues with that access, where there might be a user that has too much access or overlapping access that could create a potential risk. And that allows you as an organization to make some determinations. The first is, should that user actually have that access? If they shouldn't, you're going to want to make some changes. But if they should, it then allows you the space to document what you're doing to mitigate that risk in your organization. So how you're going about, controlling those risks. And then Audit Trail is our continuous monitoring solution that tracks all changes to critical data. These are separate tools. They don't come as a package. You can certainly purchase both of them together, but you don't need to. It really is flexible based on what your organization's needs are surrounding audit and compliance products, etc. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take a more in-depth look at each of these products. We're not going to get crazy demo deep into the products, because if you are interested and if there's things that you want to see, we certainly encourage you to set up another demo with Plumline to go through the products more in depth and how they would be applicable to your actual organization and your needs. So we're going to keep it a little bit high level, but please, like Valerie said, if there's any questions at all, type them into the questions box, and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions at the end of the demo. So from here, we'll get right into the demo.
Yep, I'm going to end the slideshow and give control.
Perfect. So I think I have control. Wonderful. So I know Assure came first in the slide deck. However, I'm going to talk about Audit Trail first. What we do when we talk about Audit Trail is there's two portions to the Audit Trail tool. There's the configuration portion, which is where you tell the tool what it is that you would like to track. And then there is the actual reporting portion, which gives you the data that you're tracking. It shows you who's made the changes, what's been changed, etc. So in order to get information on those reports, we need to tell the tool what it is that we'd like to track. And the way that our tool works is we actually connect directly to the SQL Server where the SL databases reside. So our tool gives you the flexibility to track actually anything at all that exists in a Microsoft SQL Server environment. So we're certainly able to go ahead and make we're certainly able to make selections on the SL databases, but we're also able to make selections on other SQL databases. And so now what we're doing is we're connecting to our SL SQL database. And what it's going to do, and what it's doing right now as it's cycling through this, is it's going to load every single table in that database, regardless of where that table originated from. If it's an out-of-the-box Dynamics SL table that was created upon SL install, if it was a table created by another third-party product, etc., that's going to show us all of the tables once it's done loading here. And then we go through and we pick and choose exactly which tables we'd like to audit. And then even further to that, we pick and choose exactly which fields we'd like to audit within those tables. So for example, if we wanted to audit the account table, we would come in here and we would go ahead and select the table, and we could choose the event type, insert, update, and delete. And then we have all of the different fields available in that table here. Those are the items in red, and we could choose which ones we'd want to audit. So we want to audit the account field, the account category field, whether or not it's an active account, the class ID, etc. Maybe we want to audit one of the user-defined fields, and we can certainly select that if we needed to. Or, you know, there's all these future use columns, etc. The unit of measure, if we're doing unit accounts, etc. Maybe I want to make that selection. So I can go through and select everything that I would like to audit on any single table. Okay, so that's my account table. And then from here, maybe I'd like to audit the customer table. So if I scroll down to my customer table, I can go ahead and expand this table and again find the different columns that I would like to audit. So we don't need to audit every single column in every single table. There's lots of information in these tables that might not be audit necessary. For example, I know there's a fax number field in the customer table. I can't remember the last time I sent a fax. Everything I do is done either via email or some other form of communication. We have, you know, maybe an online customer portal, things like that. And so fax number is really becoming obsolete. I don't care if that number changes, so I'm not going to track it. But I do care about the email address because now I'm sending all of my invoices via email, and if that changes, there's a potential for an invoice not to reach the intended recipient, and that can cause issues and delays in receiving my money. And I don't want to do that, so I want to audit the email address, etc. So I can go ahead and pick and choose. Now, we also have the ability to do some conditional auditing. And these are the items that you see in orange here, where it says, you know, applications not equal to, because we don't just track changes that happen within Dynamics SL. We track changes that come from anywhere at all. So if you have another application connecting to your Dynamics SL databases that are updating your data, we can say, hey, you know what, we don't want to track changes from this source or from that source. And I'll give you a good example of how we see conditional auditing used. So I sell widgets on the internet. And I have a website, and it's called, you know, liz'swidgets.com. And all of my customers go to that website and they enter all of their information, their shipping information, their billing information. They fill up their shopping cart, they check out, and everything is good. So at the end of the day, there is an import process that takes all of that information from that web program and imports it into Dynamics SL. And we'll call that web program, the program that runs my liz'swidgets.com website, Solomon. So my auditors have said to me, look, Liz, we're very confident that if 10 customers go out and either add new information into Solomon, or they update their existing information, maybe they've moved, maybe they've added a new credit card, whatever the case may be, they've updated their shipping information, maybe they want to send a widget to somebody else as a gift. We're going to go ahead and that import is going to be done into SL, and we're confident that all of the changes that happen in Solomon are making their way into SL, and so you don't really need to audit that import. That becomes a little bit redundant. Okay, so we can say, okay, anytime the change comes from Solomon, do not audit that data. Okay, so we can conditionally audit our data if we need to. So it gives us some flexibility in what kind of data we're collecting so that we're not creating a bunch of audit data that isn't very meaningful or isn't really going to get looked at, or our auditors have deemed redundant or unnecessary. Okay, so we do have the ability to go ahead and make those selections. Now, one of the things as we go through this, when we have people looking at this webinar, or we're doing a demo, one of the questions that I get is, well, this is great, but what I'm more familiar with is if I log into Dynamics SL and I go to my accounts receivable section and I go to customer maintenance, I have my customer maintenance screen, and I know, that if I change this field and that field and this field and that field, I want to know those changes. I want to know who's making them. I want to know what they were before they were changed, what they were changed to. But I don't necessarily know how those fields in that window in my Dynamics SL screen translate here to the customer table, which field exactly I should be selecting. Some of it is a little bit intuitive, and some of it may not be, but that's okay, because we will provide support in order to assist you with setting up your audits so that you're setting up the data that you want to see. Okay, so that is provided, under a service contract that you may have, but never fear that you can certainly call Plumline and say, hey guys, I need some help, and they have the service contracts available that will do that to help you get this set up. We don't just kind of throw you out to the wolves to kind of get this set up. We can certainly provide that assistance. Plumline is extremely familiar with the SL table structure and where the data resides. So from here, once we've made our selections, we need to either press the play button or go to Tools, Generate Triggers. And that is going to be the process that starts the audit. Until we generate the triggers, no data is going to be collected, and no data is going to be, shown in our reports. Anytime we make a change, for example, if we remove an item from being audited or we add a new item, we always, always, always must remember to generate our triggers, or those changes won't be committed. It's kind of like hitting the save button. Okay, so we must do that. So once we've made our selections and we've gotten our triggers generated and we're starting to collect data, we go into what we call the GRC Studio. And the GRC Studio, oops, I just lost my screen, there we go. The GRC Studio is our client tool, where this is where you would give access to see the different products, Assure, Audit Trail. If you're only going to be purchasing Audit Trail, you would only see Audit Trail there. If you're going to be purchasing both, you would see them both there, etc. But this is really the reporting tool. So the configuration tool that I just showed you, this is really for more administrative type of users. The GRC Studio, the reporting side of it, you can give access to anybody to have this, because they can't change the audit trail data from here. They can't change the audit trail configurations. They can simply review the data. And so what we have in the audit trail area is we have some out-of-the-box reports, and we are consistently working with Plumline to add new reports here. And under the administration tab, there is a report generator that allows you to continuously add new reports to the audit trail section as well. And if we take a look at one of the reports, we'll look at a customer change report. It's going to go ahead and show us the changes that were made. So for example, this was customer C331 that was updated. We had the address field updated, and this is the old value from 141 Yale Avenue to 155 Yale Avenue, made on this date at this time by this user. And the application here is telling us that this change came from within Dynamics SL. That's the screen number within SL. If the change came from Microsoft SQL Server directly, somebody went in and wrote an update statement, this would show Microsoft SQL Server, so it would have that information. Any of these reports can be printed. We can export them. We have 8 different file types, including PDF and Excel. You can send it to a text file, HTML, however you want. And the nice thing is you can filter. Right now we only have one piece of data in here, but as this data grows, if you wanted to very quickly and easily pick out some pieces, any column that you're on, if you click on that column, you're going to be able to filter on that column. There's a little key by the column name where you can certainly set up your own filters, and you can even modify those filters. There is a if we come here and let's say we were to just go ahead and select update as our event type, you'll see our filter bar shows up at the bottom. It shows us exactly what we're filtering. And if we click on the little pencil here, we can actually create our own filters, and we have lots of different criteria. So once you start to collect quite a bit of data, if you wanted to create some specific filters to very quickly and easily slice and dice through that data, let's say we're looking at customer changes, and I need to see all of the customer changes, but I really quickly want to see credit limit changes. I can build a filter to say, okay, anytime the field that's being updated is credit limit, just show me that very quickly, and I can save that filter so that the next time I come into the report, I can hit apply filter and I would grab that applied I can grab that applied filter and quickly see the results of that data in this report. So it is a pretty robust reporting tool here that allows you to slice and dice through that data. The other thing that you can do is you can actually schedule these reports for automatic delivery. Any report that you're in, you'll see there's an add to schedule button. And if we go ahead and click on that add to schedule button, we can take these reports and deliver them automatically to users via email in either PDF or Excel format. We can even save them out to a shared directory. So for example, I just want to send a weekly customer change log. And I'm going to add a description here. And we can have different criteria: week to date, month to date, quarter to date, year to date, previous week, month, quarter, year. So I'm going to have this be the previous week is data. If I wanted a daily report, I would just make last number of days and set that to 1, and that would be a daily report, or I can do a specific date range. But this is going to be a weekly report based on the previous week's changes. And any of those filters that I've built and created, I could apply to this report. So let's say I have 2 different SL companies, and I have 2 different AR managers, one for one SL company, one for another company. I could build a filter based on the company ID, send each of the managers their own sets of data based on that filter if I needed to, okay? But in this instance, I'm not going to filter the data. I'm going to send the whole set. So this looks good. I'm going to send the weekly customer change log, and I'm going to go ahead and email this to Seth in PDF format. So I'll choose him as the recipient. And I can also save it out to a folder. Maybe I want to save it out in Excel format or whatever the case may be. And we'll just go ahead and save it to the desktop and add that. And this is a weekly report. So I can choose which day of the week I want it sent on. Maybe I want it sent on Mondays. Maybe Mondays are kind of busy and it might get buried. So maybe I want to send it on a Tuesday. I certainly can. I'll have it start. I can have it start as soon as today. It's obviously not going to get sent until the next day that it occurs on, but I'll start the schedule today. I can even select what time of day I want this report to run. Default is usually sometime in the early morning hours when the server is not as busy, but maybe I want the report to run in the afternoon. So I can certainly do that. I'll click next. Everything looks good, and I will hit schedule. And so I don't know if you notice here, but I'm actually now flipped into the audit view. The audit view is just a reporting tool that's included with every purchase, whether you're purchasing Audit Trail or Assure. And this is where you can set up your different scheduled reports. And this is where your report library is going to be of all of the different reports that have been scheduled. You can edit the schedules at any time. So maybe you need a different recipient. Maybe it shouldn't go to Seth anymore. It should go to somebody else. Rather than having to delete the whole thing and start over, we can just edit this schedule. Okay, so we can certainly from here take this and just make some changes to the scheduled report without having to rebuild it. So the Audit Trail tool is pretty easy to configure and pretty user-friendly in terms of reports and being able to take that data and disseminate it out to the proper users, and in being able to schedule those reports for automatic delivery, you end up making your audit information a lot more self-service. I don't know if there's very many of you that get requests at the end of every month or at the end of every quarter, or year end, you get inundated with audit requests with people saying, I need this report and I need that report and I need a list of all of the journal entry changes and I need all of the vendor changes and especially check name changes and things like that. And it becomes really overwhelming, and there are certain things that you actually can't get out of SL at all. And so now here, if you have this configured the right way, not only can you get that information out, you can have it set up to be automatically delivered and nobody even has to bother you anymore. So your audit requirements become a lot easier to fulfill. Okay, so that's the Audit Trail tool. One of the things I want to touch on is, obviously, as we're collecting Audit Trail data, the data is stored someplace, it resides someplace, and we want to be able to go ahead and manage that data. So we go ahead and have this data tab here, and there's a manage data button. This allows us to archive and purge our Audit Trail data. Archiving simply means that it's moving it from the live tables that these Audit Trail reports are reporting on into an archive table, so it improves your report performance. Okay, and then at any point in time, you can always restore from archive. So let's say you decide to, archive, only keep 3 months worth of live data available and everything else is archived. You can even set that up to be an automatic archiving job. You don't have to go in there and do it manually. But let's say at the end of the year, your auditors say, hey, you know what? Send me a full year report of all of the vendor changes that happened in 2017. Well, you've been archiving this data, so you only have 3 months worth of live data. How are you going to be able to get him that report without having to go back and piece together old reports? Well, you don't have to. All you have to do is restore from the archive into the live table again, rerun your report, and then re-archive, or let if you're doing auto archiving, the next time the job runs, it'll re-archive it for you automatically. So you don't have to worry about that. And then you can always purge archive data. And so purging is a permanent delete. Always make sure that your backup processes are working great before you do any kind of a purge. But this helps maintain the size of your database. And after your team has determined how much Audit Trail data you need to retain and for what that retention policy is, how long. Once you exceed that retention policy, you can certainly purge the archive data right from within the tool. You don't need to do anything special to get rid of it. You can just, choose the date that you want to purge. And you can only purge archive data. It will never purge live data. Okay, so that's a little bit about the data retention and the data management piece of the Audit Trail. Okay. So very flexible, very powerful. You can pretty much audit anything at all that happens, and we're going to tell you who made the change, what has been changed, and then even some additional data like where those changes are coming from, because that becomes really important. You start to see changes happening, and then you notice that your DBA is logging in and making changes, and you're like, why is that happening? Do we have a specific ticket? Was there an issue with the system that day and he had to make the change? Or is there something else going on that we need to investigate a little further? Okay, so very robust Audit Trail system, giving you lots of good information. So from here, we'll move on to Assure. However, if there are any questions on Audit Trail, we'll certainly go ahead and answer them at the end of the, at the end of the webinar. So take advantage of that questions box, type in your questions, and we will go ahead and, answer those questions. But we'll start to talk about Assure. And what Assure is our segregation of duties and access review. Basically gives you an in-depth look into who has access to the different pieces of your system. So if you very quickly and easily wanted to see maybe which users could create vendors within your system. Okay, we could go ahead and choose our form. Okay, we'll choose the form called vendor maintenance and click go, and it's going to tell us the user that has access to that vendor maintenance screen and what types of rights they have. So do they have just read rights, or do they have update and delete, etc.? So we can see that. We can see that these are the 4 users that have access to that vendor maintenance screen. If we go to customer maintenance, the same thing. We can click go and very quickly and easily see who has access to that screen. So we see that we have 3 users that can actually maintain customers within our system. Now, again, anytime I'm in a window here in a report, I can print, I can export. My auditors might have questions about, 10, 15, 20 critical areas of the system. So I could certainly go to each screen and print the report, go to the next one and print. That becomes a little bit tedious, and I don't like tedious. I like quick and efficient. So what we give you the ability to do is create groups of forms. And we refer to those groups as critical access groups within the FastPath Assure tool. So if you notice on my toolbar, the second to last button is Customize Critical Access. And if I click on that, I can actually create a critical access group. So we'll create one called Audit. And we'll add that. And so now, once I add that group, okay, I'm going to see all of my different forms. So I want to add my customer maintenance form. So we can either type ahead or scroll. Either way, you have the ability to go ahead and add that. So then I also want to add my vendor maintenance form. So we'll go ahead and add that. So we use just the radio buttons. Maybe there's a purchase information here that we want to go ahead and add. So the purchase order maintenance. So we're going to go ahead and add that. Maybe purchase order lines. I believe that there is a journal transaction, so we're going to go ahead and add that, etc. So you just kind of go in and pick and choose all of the different forms that your auditors or your audit team or your even your finance team, whoever has determined is critical, and you want to kind of keep an eye on. Okay, you want to have an understanding of who has access to those pieces of SL, because if a user shouldn't have access and they do gain access somehow, they could be doing things in your system that could cause you problems. So you want to have visibility to that before the problems start. So what we would do there is, rather than going to form access, we would come to critical access, and we would go ahead and choose our critical access group that we just created. So I'll choose my audit group and I'll click go, and it's going to give me a list of the users that have access to the different forms. Okay, and if I wanted to group all the forms together, I could just sort on the column called form description. So I can see all the users that have access to customer maintenance, and then journal transaction, and then purchase order, and then vendor maintenance, all right here. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and tell me that information. And again, I can print, I can export. Maybe I want to just, like I said, keep an eye on this quarterly, right? Just make sure that this is kind of kosher, etc. So I'm going to add this to the schedule, and I'm going to have this delivered to myself quarterly, so I don't have to come in here and run it. I just want to get it in my email. I don't want to have to think about it. And maybe every once in a while I change my critical access group. That's fine, because my quarterly report is going to include any changes I make to my critical access group. I don't have to go through and change, delete that report and start over, because it's just being based on the group. The report is just going to run based on this group. So if I add items to that group, I don't have to update my report schedule, which is awesome. So it makes being able to report on my critical access areas super easy and super efficient. So now I have eyes on what's happening to my system, and I can nip any issues in the bud. If we're setting up some new users and we accidentally give a couple of users access to create vendors, and they shouldn't have that, Now I don't have to wait until an end of the year security review to discover that. I can see that here if I want to. I can even have this sent out to me more often. Maybe I want it sent weekly or quarterly. I'm sorry, or monthly. I can certainly do that as well, right? So it gives me good visibility into what's happening with the permissions in my system. So those are our access reviews. But then we want to go a step further and say, okay, let's pick a specific user. We'll pick, let's see who we have here. We'll pick on eBarnet, okay? And eBarnet here has access to about 55 forms in Dynamics SL. So we could sit here and we can print out this report and go through it and say, okay, well, where are my overlaps in terms of access? Where could this access cause potential issues? Do I have any, etc.? And I would have to kind of figure out, well, what combinations of access are risky for an organization, okay? And while that's a little bit subjective, depending on what the organization does and what the risk profile of the organization is, there is a pretty standard set of guidelines that tell you what to look for segregation of duties risks. The guidelines that FastPath has used in devising our conflict listing, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, are referred to as the COSO framework, KOSO, the COSO framework, and also the ISACA segregation of duties remediation best practices. That's kind of the guidelines that we use to come up with our conflict listing. So you might be sitting there saying, well, what's a conflict listing? And a conflict listing is simply combinations of access that could potentially cause risk to an organization. So for example, if you have access to journal transactions and then you have access to post the transactions themselves, you might be able to create inappropriate or fictitious journal entries and post them to the general ledger without review. Or if you have access to, chart of account maintenance and journal transactions, then that could potentially cause you to, maintain some fictitious accounts and post journal entries to those accounts. So, you could create a suspense account and start putting stuff in there so that your book's balanced, but that's not necessarily where those entries should be. Or you have access to vendor maintenance and then voucher and adjustment entry. So you could potentially maintain vendor information and create a payment to that vendor without review, etc. So we've come up with this entire listing, and out of the box, there are 221 conflicts that we have determined exist in an out-of-the-box SL install. Now, with that being said, we recognize that not every organization is the same. Not every organization has the same risk profile. And when I say risk profile, what I mean is this. Heineken, right? We all know Heineken, they manufacture and distribute beer. They have, their risk profile is really based around their manufacturing and distribution process. Producing the beer, watching out for spoilage, transportation of the product, watching out for damage, for theft, sales discounts that have been unauthorized, etc. Right? But then when we talk about a company like dice.com, Dice is a job seeking website. And so job seekers can go out there and search job listings, and then employers can go out there and post openings that they have in their organization and, put out what they're looking for as far as employment goes. So at dice.com, there's no warehouse in the back that has these job listings sitting on shelves, and they can't fall down and break, and they can't, be stolen per se. So their organizational risk really is probably more centered around their recurring revenue cycles and being and doing and their revenue recognition and journal entries in terms of accruals and probably some payables and things like that. So their risk profile is much, much different than Heineken's, right? So we recognize that every organization has its own distinct and unique risk profile. And that therefore this conflict listing is not intended to be one size fits all, but rather one size fits most. And what we give you the ability to do is under the conflicts tab to actually add and edit to the conflict listing. So you can make modifications to existing conflicts. Maybe we have something ranked high and you want to rank it as medium, or we have something ranked medium and you want to rank it as high. Or maybe there's your own custom conflict. Maybe you have a third-party product that's installed that creates a window within Dynamics SL when you have access to that window in combination with another SL window or yet another custom window could create a conflict. You want to add that to your conflict listing. So we certainly give you the ability to do that. Okay, we give you the ability to add and edit those conflicts. So why is that important? What does that conflict list give us? Well, if we go back and talk about eBarnett again, right, we knew she had access to 55 objects. But if we look at that particular user, eBarnett, at a conflict level, she has 15 conflicts. So this report is much easier to review than the 55 row report that's showing us just what she has access to, because this is saying, okay, these are the combinations of access that could pose risk to our organization. For example, she has access to vendor maintenance and voucher and adjustment entry, which could potentially allow her to maintain vendor information and create a payment to that vendor without review. So what this tool now allows us to do is not just view the conflicts, but also document what we're doing to mitigate these conflicts. So for example, in this instance, she should have access to vendor maintenance and voucher and adjustment entry. So we're going to document what our control is. And basically what we're doing to control this risk is there is a review and approval process. So we're going to choose that as our mitigation/resolution. And we're going to go ahead and choose our status as proposed because I'm the business process owner, I'm the AP manager. I'm going to go through and review what my employees have access to, but I want internal audit to take a final look at what I'm proposing as the mitigation to see if it's actually appropriate. And she has this access in all of these other companies. So rather than have to mitigate for each company, I'm going to go ahead and just select all of those other companies. And I'm going to say, vendors are monitored with the FastPath Audit Trail. I just noticed I didn't spell correctly, sorry. And all changes are reviewed by manage. Again, my spelling is atrocious today. Weekly. And we also have a batch approval process for vendor transactions where those are reviewed by managers as well. Okay, so we're just documenting what we're doing to mitigate our risk. We're saying when an auditor comes in and says, hey, you guys have too much access, you don't have adequate segregation of duties. Yeah, we know that. We can't. We run a really tight ship here. There's only a few of us working here. I can't have one person pushing one button all day long. We need to have overlapping responsibilities, but we recognize that we have these overlapping responsibilities, and this is what we're doing about it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and document that. But then there might be other areas where those overlapping accesses really are inappropriate. For example, eBarnett shouldn't have access to AP setup. The other things are okay, but absolutely not AP setup. We don't want her changing specific settings like aging buckets or anything like that. So I'm going to document here that I want security to be changed. So I'm just going to say change security in application, and I'm going to say security changed. And this is proposed again, because this is what I want to do. And maybe internal audit might review this and say, well, you know, that's not really necessary. You don't have to, etc. Or maybe they're going to go ahead and say, yeah, you know, it absolutely should be changed. And I'm going to say, I believe AP setup should be removed as this user does not need this access. Okay, so again, documenting all the steps that we need to take. So now, you know, we go through and we document all these things. Once we go in and actually make that security change, okay, this conflict won't be there anymore. But because this, for this conflict, the vendor maintenance and voucher and adjustment, it's going to persist because that user should have that access, but the status, the mitigation will also persist. It will also travel with that conflict until security is ever changed. Because if it's not, unless we change what we're doing to mitigate that risk in our organization, and that mitigation stands and it's passed audit tests, etc., we don't want to have to keep re-documenting this month after month after month after month. And the nice thing is that we have a conflict status report, and that's going to show us all of the different conflicts and what their status is, the mitigation notes, etc. So again, using my filters, I can slice and dice this and say, okay, everything that's a security changed, I want to just filter that, print this, and hand it over to my IT guys and say, here guys, work on making these security changes, start cleaning this up in SL, okay? So we have the ability to go ahead and do that. And again, the same rules hold true for any of the Assure reports. We can print them. We can export them to those 8 different file types. We can schedule them for automatic delivery. So that critical access report can be scheduled. The conflict status report can be scheduled, etc. We can certainly do all of that. So Valerie, with that being said, I hope I've given a broad enough overview of the product so that people can get a good flavor of how they're working. And are there any questions from the audience?
So I will go look in the question pane for us and see. One question that's out there, Liz, is how does the audit trail affect the system performance?
That is a great question. So the audit trail affects the system performance. Let's see. I want to be very fair when I answer this question, in saying there's no good way to know how it's going to affect the system performance. It's very subjective. However, with that being said, okay, we have optimized our triggers to be minimally invasive to the Dynamics SL environment. And because the data once collected is stored out of Dynamics SL and stored in our own FastPath database, it doesn't slow down the system. Now, with that being said, the one thing that could potentially cause a problem is not having a good understanding of what it is that you would like to audit, and therefore making the critical mistake of saying, rather than really having those internal discussions with the appropriate teams to say, what should we be auditing, to just say, you know what, I'm going to audit everything and then I'll go and kind of weed it out later. Don't do that. Never, never, never. Bad idea. We've had a couple of clients decide that they do that, and they're just going to check this upper left-hand box here in the audit trail configuration file and put a trigger on every single table and every single column. And not only did they slow down the performance of SL greatly, they went to go run a report, and that report took almost an hour to run because it had millions of rows of data that nobody is ever going to put their hand up and say, hey, I volunteer to review that data, because you're not going to find, you're creating your own haystack of data and you're not going to find the needles in it, okay? So the best way to ensure great performance with Audit Trail is having those critical internal discussions on what needs auditing, okay? So that's my politically correct answer at best.
All right. Good job. Oh, let's get that off your screen. We also have one question that says, how do we know what to audit?
Great question. So I'm going to assume that's a follow-up to my performance. So, I talked about that risk profile when I talked about Heineken versus Dice, and I talked about segregation of duties a little bit. And one of the biggest things is where you don't have adequate segregation of duties, Audit Trail is a great control. So where you have users that can create GL accounts and also post GL transactions, or create vendors and post vendor transactions, etc. Those are the areas that you want to set up audits on. Okay, so the Audit Trail tool is a great, great, great control for not being able to adequately segregate duties. And we're never saying that, you're not able to segregate duties because of processes, but rather it comes down to productivity, right? Auditors would love to see just one person handling one task, but those auditors also aren't the ones that are running the business and making sure that the business is profitable. So they don't understand we can't hire a staff of 25 people. We have to run within our means, and so we do have to have people that have overlap sometimes. So Audit Trail is a great control for those areas where we have to overlap. The other thing is, consider where your riskiest areas are. Even if you have adequate segregation of duties, what do your DBAs have access to? What can be changed externally? What other systems are connecting to Dynamics SL that could potentially change data? Where are most of your assets flowing through? Is it in the cash and receivables? Is it in AP? Is it in inventory? And I don't mean actual, it doesn't have to be cash itself, but even inventory. If there's ways for inventory to walk off the shelf or be damaged so that somebody can buy it at a hefty discount and things like that, maybe those are the areas that you need to monitor with Audit Trail.
Okay. Does the system track third-party products installed within SL?
As long as the data is stored somewhere within SQL, it absolutely does. So, for example, Valerie, give me an example of a third-party product that a lot of people seem to have for SL.
Plumline's fixed assets.
Okay, and I'm going to assume that with that, if we were to look at the tables within the SL database, there's going to be a bunch of Plumline fixed asset related tables that get created when installed. Yes. So we would just have to find those tables and set up the audits on those particular tables, but it would certainly go ahead and track that.
Okay, great. And then the last question I see in the queue is, where is Audit Trail installed?
Great question. So the Audit Trail configuration client that we're looking at right now can be installed anywhere. However, when it is installed, it does create additional databases on the Dynamics SL SQL server. And those databases have to reside on that SQL server. They cannot be put on a separate server. They can't sit on a replication server or anything like that. They do need to sit there. The GRC Studio also can sit wherever it can sit on an actual client's machine. So if it can be a local install, it can sit on an application server. You can put it on Citrix or terminal services, however you want to deploy it in your organization. It really doesn't matter. It can sit anywhere, but the underlying databases for Audit Trail and the FP Assure database that gets created for both Audit Trail and Assure do need to be installed on the actual Dynamics SQL server where the SL databases are.
Okay, awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions in the queue, Liz, so it looks like we might be good for today. I really appreciate you doing this webinar for the SL community so we can get information out about Assure and Audit Trail, because going into the season, it's the season for auditors. So
yes,
we're hoping this helps the SL community. If you are interested in our products, please reach out to sales@plumlineconsulting.com, or you can reach out to your Microsoft partner to get more information on the product, set up a private demo, or receive pricing. The Audit Trail and Assure are priced based on your SL user licenses. So there are different levels based on your licenses, and you can get all of that information again either at sales plumlineconsulting.com, or you reach out to your Microsoft partner. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you in the new year. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.